I need to finish up the first stage of this project because there's not enough room in the workshop to swing a gremlin. I started out by using some MDF to make up the base template. This will give me an indication of the overall size of it so that I'm happy with the dimensions of it, and it'll help me calculate how many pieces I need to go around the outside. The piece of wire that you can see me using here is exactly 1 metre long, and by flexing it around the outside it gave me the rough dimensions I needed to work out exactly what the proper dimensions need to be. And I wanted to work out the spacing properly so that I didn't end up with any half-size boards. The timber that I'm using is a Baltic Pine. It's essentially just floorboards, but it's a little bit thicker than the average floorboard, and I was able to buy it as a job lot. It only cost me about $120 for the timber that's gone into it, which is really cheap for this type of timber. My only disadvantage with what I'm doing is that it's exactly the amount of timber that I need. By the time I finish it up, I'll only have 3 boards spare, so I have to be really cautious that I don't make any major mistakes with it because I've virtually got no room for error. To get the timbers to fit together properly on what will be the curved section, I need to have like a cup and ball arrangement in terms of the joinery. This outside radius one was pretty simple. It's just a matter of using a regular rounding off bit and then flipping it over and doing it on the other. The inside radius though was a little bit more complicated because whilst there are matching router bits to do that type of inside curve, none of my hardware shops around anywhere that I can find locally have got any of them. And the standard answer that I've been getting is that anything that's been imported from China at the moment just isn't arriving. So under the heading of needing to get the job done, I made my own router piece. So this is the jig setup that I've come up with. This is not something that I normally recommend because these sort of bits are normally precision balanced and they usually have tungsten blades to get a really nice sort of polished cut, as opposed to what I've had to do, which was to take a regular spade drill and round it off to get the curve that I need and then cut it off to the right length so that I could use it as a router piece. This is a high carbon steel, and the piece I ended up modifying, I hardened on the edge a little bit more as well. The biggest thing with something like this, it's not going to produce as good a cut as the tungsten tip pieces will, and they do blunten down a lot quicker by comparison. Thankfully though, I only had 28 boards that I had to cut using this process, and by making up a slider jig that the wood can slip through, it held it a lot more stable, and I didn't have to worry about it kicking around on that blade tip so much. Normally a blade like that really wouldn't produce the effect that you're going for, because it really doesn't have any way of cutting that starting path, because if you think about the end of that blade touching there, there's no sharp edge at all involved in the first pass. But thankfully I was able to take advantage of the fact that the tongue and groove depth is basically the same depth that I need to get to anyway. So by using the groove that's already cut into the timber, you can see there where the blade would normally engage and not cut, it's already been cut out for me, and all I really need to do is concentrate on removing these side walls. I've decided to make up the curved end pieces and the side walls separately, rather than trying to connect it piece by piece. This will just give me 4 larger pieces that are comparatively a little easier to manage when it comes to putting them in place. I'm using a bathroom grade silicone for the joints. There's a couple of reasons why I've used silicone instead of glue. Number one, when the silicone sets, it still remains a little bit rubbery, which means I've got a bit of flex in the timber in terms of how it goes on. And the other reason is, once the silicone is dry, it kind of forms a rubber seal in between each board, which can be squashed down even tighter once I put the metal strapping on. Having it sealed up in the joints though is not a big deal for what I've got in mind. I am going to be adding a cedar stain to the timber so that it matches in a little bit better with the decking that we've got. And then the whole thing will be sealed with an epoxy resin, similar to what they put on boats and canoes and that sort of thing. So that's the second curve piece clamped into place now. You can see that I've started puttying up some of the joins on the other end. That'll all obviously have to be sanded back before I apply the stain and then seal it all up. But I think that gives you a pretty good idea of what it's starting to look like. As I said, I still have to get the metal strapping that goes around the outside, but I've got that on order, so that's just a matter of waiting for it to arrive. I'm also going to be putting a decorative piece that goes around the top of it, mostly just to make that edge look a bit nicer. But it'll also give me a bit of a lip that I can hang on to. That should make things a little easier when it comes to lifting it into position. So there's still a little ways to go on this one. I've got to work out the plumbing fixtures and all that sort of stuff as well. But now that it's finished to this stage, I can set it aside so it's not taking up quite so much room in my workshop. So anyway, that'll be the update for this time, guys. Thanks for watching. Talk to you next time.